I kissed a stranger under the mistletoe at my office Christmas party. His lips were cold as winter itself, his touch electric, his eyes holding secrets darker than midnight. I thought it was just a moment of holiday madness, a story I'd laugh about with my best friend Natalie over wine. I was wrong. 3 days later, he appeared at my door with a confession that shattered my reality. He was Darien Vossel, the Vampire King, ruler of an ancient bloodline I didn't know existed. And that kiss? It had bound us in ways I couldn't yet understand. My name is Thelma Griffin, and I'm about to learn that some holiday magic comes with fangs. If this tale pulled you into the shadows tonight, don't slip away just yet. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your presence here keeps the story alive. I didn't want to be there that night. December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, 6 months after I found my fiancée Ardath in bed with my former best friend Irene. The wounds were still raw, still bleeding beneath the surface of my carefully constructed composure. Natalie had dragged me to the office Christmas party, insisting I needed to get back out there. But out there felt dangerous, messy, heartbreaking. I'd built walls around my heart, safe walls, practical walls, walls that kept me from ever feeling that kind of pain again. The party was held in a restored Victorian mansion in Boston's Back Bay, the kind of place that whispered of old money and older secrets. Evergreen garlands draped the curved staircases, fairy lights twinkled like captured stars, and mistletoe hung from every archway and chandelier, nature's little conspiracy to force moments of intimacy. I stood near one of the tall windows, watching snow accumulate on the sill, nursing a glass of wine I wasn't really drinking. Around me, my colleagues laughed and flirted and celebrated, but I felt like a ghost at my own life, watching from the outside. Natalie bounced over with champagne, her blonde hair catching the candlelight, her whole face glowing with holiday cheer. "Come on, Thel, it's Christmas. At least pretend you're having fun. Oh, and Graham's been asking about you." "Hard pass," I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. Graham was the office playboy, handsome in a slick, corporate way, with practiced charm and wandering eyes. Exactly the kind of complication I was avoiding. But apparently, Graham didn't take hints well. I noticed him watching us from across the room, a sprig of mistletoe dangling strategically above his position, a predatory smirk on his face as he started making his way toward us. I escaped toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, seeking refuge in the shadows. I didn't notice I'd walked directly under a massive sprig of mistletoe hanging from an ornate chandelier. Graham followed, cutting off my retreat with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. "Well, well, look where we ended up, Thelma." He moved closer, invading my space, his cologne too strong, his smile too wide. "You know the rules. Mistletoe means a kiss. It's tradition." My jaw tightened. I was about to tell him exactly where he could put his tradition when a voice came from behind me. Smooth as velvet over steel. "I believe this dance is mine." I didn't hear him approach. He was just suddenly there, like he'd materialized from the shadows themselves. A man, tall, dark-haired, impossibly elegant in a long dark coat, with subtle ornate details that suggested old-world aristocracy. His face was striking. Sharp cheekbones, pale skin that seemed to catch and hold the candlelight, and eyes of an unusual pale gold that seemed to glow in the dim room. Eyes that looked at me like he knew me, like he'd been searching for me across centuries. He didn't wait for permission. His hand slid to the small of my back, cool even through the fabric of my dress, and the other lifted to cradle my face, with unexpected gentleness. Graham sputtered in protest, but the stranger didn't even glance at him. His entire focus was on me, those golden eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Forgive the liberty," he said quietly, his voice low and intimate, meant only for me. And then he kissed me. It felt like falling, like recognition, like coming home and stepping off a cliff all at once. His lips were cold, genuinely, noticeably cold, but somehow that coldness created heat everywhere else. My eyes closed without my permission. My free hand came up to grip his coat, either to push him away or pull him closer. I didn't know which, couldn't decide, couldn't think. The kiss deepened, and reality tilted on its axis. Something in my chest cracked open, some sealed, protected part of me I thought Ardath had destroyed forever. I couldn't breathe. Didn't want to breathe. The party around us faded to nothing. There was only this moment, this man, this impossible connection that felt older than time itself. It wasn't just attraction, though God knows the attraction was there, fierce and undeniable. It was something deeper, a pull beyond reason, a bond I didn't understand, but felt in my bones. When we finally parted, I was breathless, shaken to my core. His golden eyes held mine, ancient, knowing, and achingly sad, as if this his had cost him something precious. Around us, the party had gone quiet. People were staring. Even Graham had backed away, looking oddly unsettled, almost afraid. The stranger's thumb traced my cheekbone, so gentle it made my heart ache. I couldn't let him have what was meant to be mine. Before I could ask what he meant, before I could even ask his name, he stepped back. He gave me one last long look, drinking me in, memorizing me, and then turned and walked away. His movement was too smooth, too graceful, inhuman, in a way my conscious mind didn't register, but some primal part of me recognized. He moved through the crowd like water, like shadow, and then he was gone, disappearing out the mansion's front doors into the snowy Boston night. I stood there, fingers lifted to my tingling lips, my whole body trembling with something I couldn't name. Natalie rushed over, her eyes wide as saucers. "Oh my God! Who was that? Thelma, that was like something out of a movie. Are you okay? Did you know him? Why didn't you get his number?" I don't know," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know his name." I looked toward the door where he'd vanished. Snow swirled in the darkness beyond the warm spill of light. For just a moment, I could swear I saw a shadow standing across the street, watching. Then I blinked, and it was gone. I should have known then. Should have recognized the cold lips, the pale skin, the way people unconsciously moved away from him like prey sensing a predator. Should have seen the danger beneath the gentleman. But all I could think about was the kiss, and how desperately, foolishly, dangerously I wanted it to happen again. That night I lay in my bed unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling of my small Beacon Hill apartment, my fingers returning again and again to my lips. Christmas lights twinkled in my window, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about cold lips and burning eyes, about the way he said mine, like it was a fact, not a question. Natalie had texted me 17 times, asking if I'd figured out who he was. I hadn't, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd marked me somehow, changed me, that nothing would ever be the same. I didn't know how right I was. I didn't know that outside my window, on the rooftop of the building across the street, he stood in the falling snow, his face a mask of conflict and longing. Darien Vossel, the Vampire King, breaking every rule he'd set for himself in 8 centuries of careful, controlled existence. He knew he should leave, should let me return to my normal human life. But he didn't move. Couldn't move. The bond was already forming. The blood call his kind knows is irreversible, inevitable, dangerous. For 800 years, he'd been careful. For 800 years. He'd followed the laws he himself had created to protect both vampires and humans from the consequences of their collision. And one kiss, one moment of weakness, and everything crumbled. He watched my window, watched my shadow move behind the curtains. When I finally turned off the light, he remained. Guardian and predator, master and slave to a bond he never wanted and couldn't resist. 3 days. That's all the time I had left as the woman I'd been. 3 days of dreaming about golden eyes and cold lips. 3 days of jumping every time my phone rang, hoping it was somehow him, even though he didn't have my number. 3 days of feeling marked, claimed, transformed by a single kiss under the mistletoe. And then on the 3rd night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find him standing in my hallway, snow melting in his dark hair, those impossible golden eyes fixed on me with the same intensity I remembered from the party. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly, "and an apology. May I come in?" I should have said no, should have slammed the door and called the police, should have remembered my walls, my careful protections, my promise to never be vulnerable again. Instead, I stepped aside and let the Vampire King into my home, into my life, into my heart. And nothing, not my past heartbreak, not my careful plans, not my desperate need for safety, could have prepared me for what happened next. This is the story of how I fell in love with a monster who turned out to be the most honorable man I'd ever known. How I learned that vampires are real, that fairy tales are warnings, and that some kisses don't just change your night, they change your eternity. This is the story of how love, fragile, mortal, impossible love, can bridge the gap between human and immortal, between fear and courage, between the life you planned and the destiny you never saw coming. My name is Thelma Griffin, and this is how I became the Vampire Queen. 3 nights. I made it 3 nights before my carefully constructed reality came crashing down. Those 72 hours were torture. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except cold lips and golden eyes. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of him. Dreams where his hands traced patterns on my skin, where his voice whispered words I couldn't quite hear, where I fell into darkness that felt like coming home. I'd wake gasping, heart racing, fingers pressed to lips that still tingled from a kiss that should have faded but somehow hadn't. Work was unbearable. Natalie ambushed me every morning with the same questions. Did you find him? Did he call? Did you Google mysterious hot guys in Boston? She'd created an entire romantic narrative where the stranger was a billionaire entrepreneur, a European prince, a famous actor traveling incognito. Each theory more ridiculous than the last, and none of them remotely close to the truth I didn't yet know. Even Graham wouldn't leave it alone, which was strange. He kept appearing at my desk, asking pointed questions about whether I'd seen my admirer again, if the stranger had tried to contact me, whether I'd noticed anything unusual since the party. There was something odd in his eyes when he asked. Not jealousy, but something closer to fear, or maybe warning. I told him to mind his own business, but his interest unsettled me in ways I couldn't articulate. The third night, I came home late from a client meeting, exhausted and desperate for the oblivion of sleep I knew wouldn't come. I'd just kicked off my heels and was reaching for the kettle when the knock came. 3 precise taps. Deliberate. Expected somehow, even though I'd been expecting nothing. My heart knew before my mind did. I crossed to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I didn't check the peephole, didn't ask who it was. I just opened the door. He stood in my hallway like a figure from a dream, snow melting in his dark hair, those impossible golden eyes fixed on me with an intensity that stole my breath. He wore the same dark coat from the party, and he looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful and dangerous, and somehow as if carrying the weight of centuries. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly, his voice that same velvet over steel that had haunted my dreams, "and an apology. May I come in?" Every rational instinct screamed at me to slam the door, to call 911, to do anything except what I did. But rationality had abandoned me 3 nights ago, under the mistletoe. I stepped aside and let him enter my small apartment. He moved with that same unnatural grace I'd noticed at the party, crossing to my living room window, where he stood looking out at the snowy Boston street below. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. "My name is Darian Vossel," he began, still not looking at me. "What I'm about to tell you will sound insane. You'll think I'm delusional, dangerous, or both, but I need you to listen. Can you do that?" I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. "Yes." He turned then, and the look in his eyes made my chest ache. Ancient sorrow mixed with desperate hope. "Vampires are real, Thelma. We've lived hidden among humans for millennia, walking in your cities, building our own societies in the spaces between your world and darkness. I am their king, ruler of the vampire bloodlines of North America. And that kiss?" His voice dropped lower. It created a bond between us. What my kind calls the blood call. A recognition that happens perhaps once in a vampire's very long lifetime. I stared at him, waited for the punchline. When none came, I laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. "This is a joke. Some kind of elaborate—" "It's not." His voice was gentle but firm. "I know how it sounds. That's why I stayed away for 3 days, fighting the bond, trying to convince myself I could leave you alone. But I can't, Thelma. I can feel you, your emotions, your presence. Right now, you're terrified and confused, and part of you wants to run. But there's another part." He paused. "Another part that's drawn to me the same way I'm drawn to you, and you don't understand why. You need to leave," I whispered, backing toward the door. "Right now, or I'm calling." He moved. One moment he was by the window, the next he was across the room, faster than my eyes could track. Not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from his skin. My back hit the wall. "I'm sorry," he said, and he sounded genuinely anguished. "But you need proof. You need to understand what you're dealing with." His lips pulled back, and I saw them. Fangs, elongated canines, that caught the light and looked razor sharp. My heart stopped. Before I could scream, he moved again, appearing on the opposite side of the room, in less than a blink. Then he raised his hand, and my coffee mug lifted from the table, floating through the air without him touching it, spinning slowly before settling back down. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall, landing hard on the floor, every molecule of my being screaming that this was impossible. that reality didn't work this way, that everything I knew was wrong. Darian knelt in front of me, careful to keep distance between us. His fangs had retracted. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I know this is terrifying, but you needed to see." "This isn't real," I whispered. "This can't be real." "It is. And now that you know, you're in danger. My kind have laws, ancient laws, designed to protect our secret. When a human learns the truth, there are only 3 options. Turn them, bind them in servitude, or eliminate them." He paused, letting that sink in. "My position protects you from immediate action, but there are others who will see you as a threat, as leverage against me. If they discover our bond, what do you want from me?" The question came out broken, barely audible. I was terrified, overwhelmed, and yet, God help me, still drawn to him, still wanting him closer, even as every instinct screamed danger. "Nothing you're not willing to give," Darian said softly. "I'm not here to force anything, Thelma. I'm here because I couldn't stay away, because the bond won't let me abandon you, and because you deserve to know what's happening. There are others of my kind in this city. Some are honorable, bound by the same codes I follow. Others," his jaw tightened, "others are not. If they discover our connection, they'll try to use you against me. Or worse." He pulled a card from his coat, setting it on the floor between us. "My number. Call me if anything strange happens. If you see anyone who feels wrong, who moves wrong, who watches you too closely, I'll protect you whether you want me near or not. That's not negotiable." He stood, moved toward the door with that inhuman grace. His hand was on the handle when I found my voice. "Wait." He stopped, not turning. "Why?" I asked. "Why tell me? Why not just stay away? Leave me in ignorance?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with something that sounded like pain. "Because I've lived 800 years, Thelma. 8 centuries of control, of following laws I created, of putting duty above everything else. And then I kissed you, and for the first time in all those centuries, I felt human again. I felt alive, and I couldn't bear the thought of you believing that kiss was nothing, that you were nothing." He turned his head slightly, golden eyes catching mine over his shoulder. "Even if you hate me now, even if you're terrified, I needed you to know the truth." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone on the floor of my apartment with a business card and a shattered worldview. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Long enough for the snow outside to stop, for the city to quiet into that deep winter silence. My phone buzzed. Natalie, probably, wanting to grab drinks or dissect my day. I pulled it out, stared at her name on the screen, then set it down. How could I possibly explain this? How could I tell her that vampires were real, that I'd been kissed by their king, that my entire understanding of reality had just been obliterated? She'd think I'd lost my mind. Hell, maybe I had. I picked up Darian's card. Heavy stock, expensive. Just a name and a phone number, no title, no business listed. Simple and elegant and somehow ominous. I should throw it away. Should pretend this never happened, that he never came here, that vampires were still just fiction. I should go back to my safe, walled-off life where the worst thing that could happen was another cheating boyfriend, not supernatural predators in the shadows. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't, couldn't, because part of me, the part that had awakened under the mistletoe, the part that had been dead since Ardath destroyed me, was finally, terrifyingly alive again. And despite everything, despite the fear and the impossibility, and the danger. I realized I was already waiting for the next time I'd see those golden eyes. God help me, I was already lost. I spent the days after Christmas Eve drowning in vampire mythology. My browser history became a paranoid mess. Folklore from every culture, obscure academic papers, conspiracy forums where people debated whether vampires controlled the government. Most of it was nonsense, contradictory and dramatic. But buried in the fiction, I found threads of truth that made my blood run cold. The aversion to sunlight, the need for invitation, the terrible beauty that made humans easy prey. I jumped at shadows. Every pale stranger on the street made my heart race. I stopped sleeping properly, dozing in fits and starts, waking at every creak of the old building settling. Natalie noticed immediately. "You look terrible," she said over lunch on the 27th, studying me with worried eyes. "Are you sick? Is this about the mystery guy? Did something happen?" "I'm fine," I lied, pushing food around my plate without eating. "Just holiday stress." But I wasn't fine. The world had tilted, and I couldn't find my footing anymore. Everything looked different now. The night seemed darker, the shadows deeper, every stranger potentially something other than human. And through it all, Darian's card burned in my pocket like a coal, tempting me to call, to hear his voice, to demand more answers. I didn't call. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness. A desperate need to prove I could handle this alone. That I didn't need him or his protection. That I was still in control of my own life. Then the strange things started happening. First, the woman on the subway. Tall, pale, with white blonde hair pulled back severely and eyes like chips of ice. She appeared on my morning commute on the 28th, standing across the car, staring at me with unsettling intensity. When I got off at my stop, she didn't follow, but I felt her gaze burning into my back until the doors closed. The next day, she was there again. Same car, same unblinking stare. This time when I met her eyes, she smiled. Cold and sharp, before the train pulled away. Then Graham cornered me in the break room, his usual cockiness replaced by something that looked like desperation. "You need to tell me the truth, Thelma. That guy from the party, have you seen him again? Has he contacted you?" "That's none of your business," I said, trying to push past him. He grabbed my arm, grip too tight. "This isn't a game. If he's involved with you, you need to be careful. Very careful. There are things in this city." He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much, and released me. "Just be careful." The final straw came on the 30th. I was walking home from the corner store, an arms full of groceries, when the homeless man who usually sat outside my building grabbed my sleeve. His eyes were roomy but sharp, his voice urgent. "Stay away from the cold ones, girl. They're watching you. They're always watching." He leaned closer, breath sour. "The pale lady, she's not the only one. There are others. They're deciding what to do with you." My groceries hit the sidewalk. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, finding Darian's number, pressing call before I could second-guess myself. He answered on the first ring. "Thelma." Just my name, but the relief in his voice was palpable. I couldn't finish. Didn't know what I needed, except that everything was falling apart, and he was the only person who understood why. "I'm coming. Stay inside. Lock your doors. I'll be there in 5 minutes." He made it in 3. This time, he didn't come to my apartment. His car, sleek, black, expensive, idled at the curb. He stood beside it, looking impossibly elegant in the winter dusk, and when I emerged from my building, his whole body seemed to relax. "Get in," he said gently. "There are things you need to see," Things you need to understand. I should have been afraid. Should have demanded answers right there on the street. Instead, I got in the car, and he drove us through the snowy streets of Boston to a historic brownstone in the South End. From the outside, it looked like any other wealthy residence. Tasteful, old money, unremarkable. Darian led me through an elegant foyer to what appeared to be a wine cellar door. But when he opened it, instead of stairs going down to dusty bottles, there was an elevator. Sleek, modern, completely incongruous with the building's historic exterior. "This is the public face," he explained as the elevator descended. "What humans see. But my real court exists below, in spaces carved out over centuries. Welcome to my world, Thelma." The doors opened onto something from a Gothic dream. A vast underground complex of stone corridors, lit by modern lighting designed to look like torchlight. Arched ceilings soared overhead. Tapestries that looked centuries old hung on walls. And everywhere, vampires. They moved through the space with that same inhuman grace, all beautiful and terrible, all turning to stare as Darian led me deeper into their domain. I felt like prey among predators, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. "Darian," a man appeared before us, dark-haired, severe, with eyes that assessed me like a threat. "This is unwise. Kaelin, my second in command," Darian introduced. "Kaelin, this is Thelma Griffin. She's under my protection." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "The council won't like this." "The council will adapt," Darian said firmly, moving past him. We entered a great hall, part throne room, part library, with books lining walls and comfortable seating arranged in clusters. 3 figures waited there. An elderly vampire with kind eyes and silver hair approached first. "Miss Griffin, I'm Myron. I've been curious to meet you." His voice was gentle, scholarly. "The human who captured our king's heart." "I'm Leora," said a cold voice. The blonde woman from the subway stepped forward, and my breath caught. "I've been watching you. Protection detail, on Darian's orders. You're welcome, by the way." "You scared me half to death," I breathed. "Better scared than dead," she said flatly, but something in her eyes suggested approval. The last vampire swept forward with theatrical flair. Tall, elegant, with elaborate period clothing that somehow didn't look ridiculous. "Faldor, master of ceremonies and keeper of traditions. How delightful to finally meet the woman causing such delicious chaos in our normally staid court." Darian guided me to a chair, then stood beside me like a guardian. "Thelma needs to understand what she's facing. Tell her about the laws, Myran." The elderly vampire's expression grew grave. "When a human learns of our existence, ancient law dictates 3 options. Turn them, bind them in servitude, or eliminate them. Darian's position as king protects you from immediate action, but the council is watching. There's a faction, led by a vampire lord named Ceres, who sees humans as lesser beings. They view Darian's attachment to you as dangerous weakness." "So I'm a liability," I said, anger cutting through fear. I stood, rounding on Darian. "You did this to me. That kiss. Telling Dimmy the truth, you made me a target." "I know," he said quietly. "You know?" My voice rose. "That's all you have to say? I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to kiss you, to feel this thing between us, to have my entire life turned upside down. I was safe before you. Lonely maybe, but safe." "Neither did I." His composure cracked, ancient control shattering. "I've lived 800 years, Thelma. 8 centuries of discipline, of following laws I created, of putting duty above everything. I've watched empires rise and fall, I've seen centuries of humans live and die. And then you, his voice dropped. One kiss, and everything I built crumbles. Do you think I wanted this? To feel this vulnerable? To care this much about a human woman who will be gone in the blink of an eye, leaving me with another 8 centuries of remembering? The raw pain in his voice stopped me cold. I saw past the vampire king to something underneath, something lonely and desperate and terrifyingly human. I'm sorry, he said, quieter now. I'm sorry you're in danger because of me, but I can't regret knowing you. I can't regret feeling something again after so long being numb. The others had quietly withdrawn, giving us privacy in the vast room. I sank back into the chair, exhausted. Tell me everything, I said. If I'm in this, I need to understand. So he told me about vampire bloodlines stretching back millennia, about the delicate laws that kept them hidden from humanity, about the council that governed them, split between those who wanted peaceful coexistence and those who saw humans as prey, about his own turning, a medieval warrior transformed into the monster he'd once hunted, spending centuries trying to prove vampires could be more than predators. We talked through the night. I told him about Ardath, about the betrayal that had closed me off, about building walls to keep from ever hurting again. He told me about centuries of loss, about loving mortals who withered while he remained unchanged, about eventually choosing isolation over endless grief. The blood call doesn't happen often, he explained, as false dawn approached. Maybe once in a vampire's lifetime, if they're lucky. It's a recognition, 2 souls meant to find each other. But for me, it's a curse as much as a blessing. Because even if you chose me, even if we had decades together, you'd still age, still detour, and I'd be left with eternity to mourn you. Then why pursue this? I asked. Why not let me go? Because, he said simply, some things are worth the pain. Some people are worth every moment of grief that comes after. You make me feel human again, Thelma. And I've been a monster so long, I'd forgotten what that felt like. By the time he drove me home, dawn was breaking. The first light made him look almost human, softer, younger. The eternal predator, momentarily masked by vulnerability. At my door, he stopped. I can't promise this won't be dangerous, he said, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. I should have gone inside, should have said goodbye and locked the door and tried to return to normal life. Instead, I reached out and took his cold hand, lacing my fingers through his paw. I'm not as fragile as you think, I said. His eyes closed briefly, as if in prayer or pain. Then he lifted my hand and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, old-fashioned, courtly, achingly tender. I know, he whispered. That's what terrifies me most. He left me at sunrise, disappearing into his car, just as the first rays touched the street. I stood at my window, watching Boston wake, knowing I was being watched in turn by forces I was only beginning to understand. Across the street, hidden in a shadowed doorway, another vampire observed the scene. Cerise had seen everything, the protective way Darian touched her, the way she'd taken his hand without hesitation, the bond between them already deepening into something dangerous. We'll see how strong you really are, little human, he murmured to himself, cold eyes calculating. We'll see. For 3 days, I lived between worlds. New Year's Eve came and went in a blur of stolen moments with Darian, learning his world while he remembered what it meant to see through human eyes. He took me ice skating on a private pond outside the city, moving across the ice with impossible grace while I clung to his arm, laughing as he caught me every time I stumbled. Later, back at my apartment, I introduced him to hot chocolate and Christmas movie marathons. Watching an 800-year-old vampire king furrow his brow at Netflix, genuinely baffled by how the moving pictures knew what I wanted to watch next, made me laugh until my sides hurt. It was the first real laughter since Ardath, and it felt like breaking through ice into sunlight. But the real world kept intruding. Natalie noticed my strange hours, the way I'd disappear without explanation, how I jumped at every text notification. "You're scaring me," she said over coffee on January 2nd. "What's going on with you? Is it this mystery guy? Thelma, if you're in some kind of trouble—" "I'm fine," I lied, the words ash in my mouth. Jerry from accounting cornered me the same day. "Saw you getting into a seriously fancy car with some scary-looking dude. You dating a mobster or something?" He laughed, but his eyes were curious, probing. And Graham's questions became pointed, urgent, as if he were reporting to someone. "Has he told you what he really is? Has he explained the danger you're in?" I stopped answering his calls. The fragile happiness shattered on January 3rd. Darian arrived at my apartment looking ancient, tired in a way I'd never seen. When an immortal looks exhausted, you know something is catastrophically wrong. "The council met today," he said without preamble. "Saris presented an ultimatum." My blood went cold. "What kind of ultimatum?" "The traditional kind. Turn you, bind you, or eliminate you." His voice was flat, controlled, but I could see the fury underneath. "He argued that you know too much, that your continued existence violates our oldest laws." Several neutral council members sided with him. They're afraid of exposure, of humans discovering us because of one king's attachment to a mortal woman. "When?" I whispered. "The winter solstice celebration, January 6th. I have until then to choose. And if you don't, then the council will choose for me." He crossed to me, took my face in his cold hands. "I told them I refuse all three options, that I'll find a fourth way." "What if I chose?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "What if I chose to become like you?" His reaction was immediate and vehement. "No, absolutely not." "Why not? If it keeps me safe, you don't understand what you'd be giving up." His composure cracked completely. "Turning is agony, Thelma. You die as a human and are reborn as something else. You might keep your memories, but your emotions, your values, your very humanity, they all change. The sun becomes poison. Food tastes like ash. And the hunger—" He stopped, throat working. "I won't take that from you. Not when you've known me only 2 weeks. Not when you can't possibly understand what forever means." "And if I do understand?" I challenged. "If I still choose you?" Something in his eyes broke open. Hope and despair mixed together. "Then I would give you forever," he said quietly. "But you're not ready, Thelma. You deserve time to be certain. You deserve—" The window exploded inward. The vampire moved too fast to track. Male, pale, fangs bared in a predator's snarl. Torin, I'd learn later, one of Saris's enforcers sent to deliver a message written in blood. His claws caught my shoulder as I dove sideways, tearing through fabric and skin. Pain exploded white-hot down my arm. Then Leora was there, materializing from shadows I didn't know she'd been hiding in. The fight was savage and brief. Vampire speed and strength colliding in my small apartment, furniture shattering, walls cracking. When it ended, Torin was staked on my living room floor, dissolving into ash, and Leora stood over him breathing hard. "Message delivered," she said grimly. Darian arrived seconds later, moving through my door like smoke, and the sight of my blood turned him into something I'd never seen. Ancient, terrible, a predator king whose rage could end empires. For one heart-stopping moment, I saw not my conflicted lover, but the monster he'd spent centuries keeping leashed. Then his eyes found mine, and the monster retreated. "You're hurt." "I'm okay," I managed, though blood soaked my sleeve and shock was setting in. "You're not safe here anymore." His voice left no room for argument. "Pack a bag. You're staying in my stronghold until the council meeting." I wanted to argue, to insist on my independence, to prove I could handle this. But Torin's ash was still settling on my carpet, and my shoulders screamed with every breath. I nodded. Natalie appeared at my door 20 minutes later, drawn by the commotion, eyes wide, as she took in the destroyed apartment and my blood-stained clothes. "What the hell happened? Thelma, you need to tell me the truth right now. Are you in trouble? Is this guy dangerous?" I looked at my best friend, normal, human, safe Natalie, who thought the worst dangers were bad boyfriends and office politics, and realized I'd already crossed a line I could never uncross. I was living in a world she couldn't see, facing threats she couldn't imagine. "I can't explain it," I said quietly, shoving clothes into a bag with one shaking hand. "But I need you to trust me. I'm okay. I promise." It was a lie, and we both knew it. As Darian's car pulled away from my building, I watched through the rear window as Natalie stood on the sidewalk, phone already pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear her, but I could read her lips well enough. "Gilmore, it's me. I need you to investigate someone. Darian Vossel. And I need it done yesterday." In the driver's seat, Darian's hands tightened on the wheel. "Your friend is going to dig into things better left buried." "I know," I whispered, "but I can't blame her. If I were watching my best friend disappear into danger, I'd do the same thing. This is going to get worse before it gets better." I touched my wounded shoulder, feeling the ache of claws that had nearly found my throat. I know that too. Living in Darian's underground court was like existing in a beautiful nightmare. Everywhere I turned, vampires watched me with expressions, ranging from curiosity to hunger. I was the only human in a predator's den, my heartbeat a constant drumbeat announcing my fragility, my mortality, my otherness. Myrian became my unlikely anchor. The ancient scholar took me under his wing, teaching me vampire history in his vast library. Tales of bloodlines stretching back to antiquity, of wars fought in shadows while humans slept peacefully above. "Knowledge is armor," he said gently. "The more you understand us, the less you'll fear us." But fear was unavoidable. I witnessed things that made my stomach turn. Vampires treating human blood donors with casual cruelty, viewing them as ambulatory meals rather than people. The political maneuvering was vicious, ancient grudges playing out in cutting remarks and power plays that would have made corporate politics look quaint. These were immortal beings who'd forgotten what it meant to be fragile, to measure life in decades rather than centuries. Lyora trained me in self-defense, though we both knew it was futile. "You'll never beat a vampire in a fight," she said bluntly, showing me how to break holds and target vulnerabilities. "But you can buy yourself seconds. Sometimes, seconds are enough for help to arrive." Faldor engaged me in philosophical debates that stretched for hours, fascinated by my human perspective on mortality and meaning. "You have so little time," he mused, "yet you burn so brightly. We have eternity, and most of us have grown cold." But it was the nights with Darian that kept me grounded. On the second night, after the court had quieted, he came to my chambers. We'd been circling each other for days, drawn together by the blood call, held apart by fear and the weight of impossible choices. "I shouldn't be here," he said, standing in my doorway. "But you are," I replied. He crossed the room like darkness made manifest, and when his mouth found mine, it felt like coming home and falling off the world's edge simultaneously. We gave in to what had been building since that first kiss under the mistletoe, desperate and tender, fierce and gentle. He was reverent with my mortal body, every touch a prayer, every kiss tinged with the bitter sweetness of impermanence. In his arms, vulnerability didn't feel like weakness. It felt like courage, like choosing to be fully alive, even knowing how easily life could be snuffed out. Afterward, in the quiet darkness, he told me about his human life. "I was a warrior in medieval England," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I hunted monsters, or what I thought were monsters. Then I became one, turned on a battlefield, left for dead, but rising as the very thing I'd sworn to destroy." His fingers traced patterns on my skin. "I've spent 800 years trying to be honorable, to prove vampires can be more than predators. You make me feel human again, not the monster, not the king, just myself." "You are yourself," I whispered. "All of it. Monster and man, king and warrior. You don't have to choose." "With you, I don't have to," he said, and kissed me again like I was oxygen, and he was drowning. But outside our stolen moments, danger multiplied like shadows at dusk. Myrian brought news that Gilmore, Natalie's investigator brother, had stumbled onto something bigger than one vampire king. He'd made contact with Hawkins, a vampire hunter whose daughter had been killed years ago by rogues. Hawkins had been tracking unusual activity in Boston, and his research was converging on Darian's court, and, by extension, on me. "Your friend's brother is competent," Myrian said grimly, "and he's allied with someone dangerous. Hawkins doesn't discriminate between honorable vampires and rogues. To him, we're all monsters who deserve death." Ceres was making moves, too. Through Kalen's intelligence network, we learned he'd allied with Ashvale and Seneth, ambitious vampires who'd long coveted Darian's throne. They were spreading poison through the vampire world. The king was weak, compromised, willing to break sacred laws for a mortal woman. Some vampires, especially younger ones hungry for power, were being swayed. The court was fracturing along fault lines that had existed for centuries. The turning point came on January 5th, when Myrian burst into the library where I was studying. His ancient eyes alight with discovery. "I found something," he said, spreading a crumbling manuscript before us. "An old prophecy nearly forgotten. When the king's heart beats for mortal blood, the court shall fall or rise anew. The hybrid choice shall break the old law." Darian studied the text, his expression unreadable. "What does it mean?" "That your bond with Thelma isn't unprecedented. It's pivotal," Myrian said. "Something about this connection could fundamentally change vampire society. The hybrid choice. I believe it refers to a turning born of true love rather than necessity or power. A transformation that bridges human and vampire in ways we haven't seen in millennia." "So I'm not just a liability," I said slowly. "I'm a catalyst." "Which makes you even more dangerous to Ceres and his faction," Kalen said from the doorway, his expression grave. "They don't want change. They want the old ways. Vampires as apex predators, humans as cattle. Your existence threatens their entire worldview." That night, the court buzzed with preparations for the winter solstice celebration, the longest night of the year, when vampire power peaked and ancient rituals were observed. Darian would have to present his decision to the full council. The air felt electric with anticipation and dread. I found Darien on a balcony overlooking the underground complex, watching his people prepare. When I touched his arm, he pulled me close, his cold skin pressed against my warmth. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "So am I," he said. "In 800 years, I've never been this afraid of losing something." "Whatever happens tomorrow," I said, turning to face him, "I want you to know I don't regret the kiss. I don't regret any of this. Even if it ends badly, even if I lose everything, these weeks with you have made me feel more alive than I did in all the years before." His eyes closed, and he held me like I was the last solid thing in a dissolving world. "Nor do I," he whispered. "Whatever comes, know that you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The belief that monsters can be redeemed, that love can exist even across the divide between mortal and immortal." We stood there as preparations continued below, memorizing each other, the warmth of my skin against his cold, the beating of my mortal heart, the way we fit together despite being impossible. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow we'd face the council, Ceres's machinations, and a choice that could reshape vampire society or end us both. But tonight, we had this moment. And it was enough. In the shadows below, Ceres watched them with cold calculation. Tomorrow's celebration would be the perfect opportunity. Ancient ritual, gathered witnesses, Darien vulnerable in his attachment to the human. He wouldn't just demand Thelma's death. He'd take everything. The throne, the court, the future. And he'd make Darien watch his precious human die before claiming his crown. "Tomorrow," Ceres murmured to Ashvale and Seneth, "we end this farce. Tomorrow, we restore the old ways." The three vampires smiled, and their smiles promised blood. The cathedral was carved from bedrock centuries before Boston existed above it, a Gothic masterpiece of soaring arches and intricate stonework, lit by 1,000 candles that turned the space into something between sacred and profane. Vampires from across North America filled the pews, their collective power making the air thick and electric. The longest night of the year, when their strength peaked and ancient rituals held sway. I stood beside Darien before the council, my heart hammering against my ribs, while he remained perfectly still. When he spoke, his voice carried through the vast space with absolute authority. "I choose Thelma Griffin's freedom," he announced. "She will remain human, will return to her life, and our bond will be severed through the ancient rite of dissolution." It was a lie. We'd rehearsed it carefully, the only solution that bought us time while keeping me alive and human. But the words still cut like silver through my chest. The council erupted in debate, some approving, others protesting this unprecedented mercy. Then Ceres rose from his seat, and the temperature in the cathedral seemed to drop 10 degrees. "How convenient," he said, his voice dripping contempt. "The king breaks our oldest laws, endangers our secrecy, and faces no consequences. But I have consequences for you, Darien vassal." Vampires emerged from the shadows. Ashvale, Seneth, and a dozen others I didn't recognize. Too many. Far too many. "I challenge your rule," Ceres declared. "You are unfit to be king, weakened by human attachment, willing to break sacred laws for mortal sentiment. According to ancient law, leadership can be challenged through trial by combat." Darien's expression didn't change, but I felt his rage through our bond, centuries of controlled fury ready to be unleashed. "I accept your challenge." "Excellent," Ceres smiled, cold and sharp. "But first, let's remove distractions." His allies moved like lightning, Hands grabbed me before I could scream, vampire strength rendering my struggles meaningless. They dragged me to the center of the cathedral, where a ritual circle had been carved into the stone floor, fresh, prepared, waiting. "Choose, Darian," Ceres called out. "Fight me and your human dies. Yield your crown, and I'll let her return to her pathetic mortal life." The cathedral descended into chaos. Kaelin and Leora drew weapons, ready to fight, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Vampires who'd remained neutral were forced to choose sides as ancient grudges resurfaced. Myrian frantically searched through scrolls, looking for some law or loophole that could save us, and Darian stood frozen, caught in an impossible trap. Fight and I died. Yield and Ceres would kill me anyway, along with everyone loyal to Darian. Either way, we lost. "Actually," Ceres continued, producing a ceremonial blade that gleamed with silver inlay, "I've changed my mind. If the prophecy speaks of a hybrid choice, let's give the king what he wants." He grabbed my hair, forcing my head back. "If Darian desires a vampire queen, he shall have one. But she'll belong to me, not him. Let's see how devoted he is when his precious human is a monster who hates him." Terror froze my blood as understanding hit. He was going to turn me, forcibly, without my consent, binding me to him instead of Darian. The ultimate violation. The worst nightmare made real. Ceres cut his wrist, dark blood welling up, and brought it toward my mouth. "Drink, little human. Become what you fear most." But in that moment, clarity cut through my panic. I'd spent weeks learning vampire lore from Myrian. I knew their laws, their rituals, their weaknesses, and I knew that a forced turning without willing participation at the crucial final moment created something unstable, a mad vampire, dangerous and uncontrollable. As Ceres's blood touched my lips, I used everything Leora had taught me. I twisted sharply, breaking his grip for just a heartbeat, long enough to grab the ceremonial silver dagger from the ritual circle and drive it into his side. Silver burned vampire flesh. Ceres screamed, stumbling back, and the ritual shattered incomplete. Darian moved. I'd never seen him unleash his full power. 8 centuries of accumulated strength and skill suddenly freed from all restraint. He was terrifying and magnificent, more force of nature than person. The Vampire King showed exactly why he'd held his crown through centuries of challengers. The battle was chaos, vampires moving too fast for human eyes to track, blood and silver, ancient powers clashing in ways that made the cathedral shake. Kaelin and Leora fought at Darian's side, their loyalty absolute. Myrian shielded me, pulling me away from the worst of the fighting. But chaos breeds opportunity for the desperate. Ashvale, seeing the tide turning against Ceres's coup, tried to flee. As he passed me, he struck out, claws extended, a final spiteful gesture toward the human who'd started all this trouble. Pain exploded through my side, hot and absolute. His claws had torn deep, too deep, through organs that humans needed to live. I collapsed, blood pouring out faster than my body could replace it. Through our bond, Darian felt it, felt my life beginning to slip away. He abandoned the fight mid-strike, appearing at my side so fast he seemed to teleport. "No, no, no," he breathed, his hands pressing against the wound, trying futilely to stop the bleeding. But we both knew. This was fatal. Minutes, maybe seconds. "Do it," I whispered, blood on my lips, my vision already darkening at the edges. "I choose this. I choose you. I'm not afraid anymore." "Thelma, you don't understand. I do, I insisted, using the last of my strength to grip his coat. I understand perfectly. I'm not losing you. Not when I just found the courage to love again. Turn me. Save me. Let me fight beside you. Let me live. His face was anguish incarnate, the impossible choice he'd tried so hard to avoid. Save me and take my humanity, or let me die and carry that grief for centuries. No time for discussion, for careful consideration, for informed consent. Just seconds and a choice. Forgive me, he whispered. Then he bit. The ritual was swift and violent, his venom burning through my veins like liquid fire. His blood forced past my lips, cold and copper-sweet, and wrong in ways that made my soul scream. My heart stuttered, racing faster and faster before beginning to slow. The world dimmed. Sound faded. I felt my body dying, felt Thelma Griffin, human, fragile, mortal, slipping away into darkness. And then there was nothing. Silence fell over the cathedral. The fighting had stopped. Ceres and his allies fled or captured. In the wreckage of overturned pews and scorched stone, everyone waited. Darian cradled my body, not breathing, not moving, caught in the space between death and transformation. And for the first time in 800 years, the Vampire King wept. "Come back to me," he whispered into my hair. "Please, come back." We waited to see if I would wake, and what I would be when I did. I woke slowly, swimming up through layers of darkness that felt both infinite and momentary. The first thing I noticed was sound. Not just sound, but a symphony of it. Heartbeats in the building far above, each one distinct and rhythmic. Footsteps blocks away. Conversations whispered behind closed doors. The world had volume I'd never imagined. Then came sight. Colors weren't just brighter, they were more. Shades and gradations my human eyes had never detected. The spectrum expanded beyond what I'd thought possible. Even in the dim underground chamber, I could see every detail with perfect clarity. And smell. God, the smell. Blood pumping through veins, rich and copper-sweet, and calling to something primal inside me. The hunger was there, undeniable as gravity, but it didn't consume me, didn't drive me into the mindless frenzy I'd feared. It was just there, manageable, part of me now. "Thelma!" Darian's voice, careful and hopeful and terrified all at once. I turned my head, faster than I meant to, the movement inhumanly quick, and found him beside me. He looked haggard, ancient in a way I'd never seen, as if he'd aged centuries in however long I'd been. Changing. "How do you feel?" he asked, still holding my hand like he'd been holding it the entire time. Maybe he had. I took inventory. Stronger. I could feel power coiled in muscles that had never held it before. Faster. My thoughts moved like lightning, processing information at impossible speeds. Sharper. Every sense dialed up to supernatural levels. But underneath all that, "I feel like me," I said wonderingly, and my voice was the same, still mine. Changed, but not lost. "Darian, I still remember everything. Natalie's laugh, my mother's terrible pot roast, the coffee shop on the corner, Ardath's betrayal, and how it felt to build walls around my heart. I remember being human." Tears welled up. Could vampires cry? And spilled down my cheeks. Apparently, yes. "I'm still me." Myrian appeared in the doorway, his ancient eyes wide with wonder. "Extraordinary," he breathed. The turning worked perfectly, better than perfectly. You retained your humanity, Thelma. Your emotions, your memories, your compassion. The bond between you and Darian, formed through the blood call, created something unprecedented. He moved closer, studying me with scholarly fascination. You're a bridge, child. Human and vampire. Mortal memory in immortal form. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change and challenge. The coup's aftermath reshaped vampire society in ways that rippled through their hidden world. Cerise had fled during the chaos, but was eventually tracked down and exiled to the outer territories, his power base destroyed, his allies scattered. Ashvale and Seneth bent the knee, accepting Darian's continued rule with grudging respect. I'd proven myself in battle, and vampires understood strength. But more importantly, the council reformed. Conservative vampires who'd witnessed my courage during the solstice confrontation found their certainty shaken. The prophecy Myrian had discovered was reinterpreted. My transformation represented not the fall of vampire society, but its potential evolution. A way forward that didn't require them to be monsters. I was declared Darian's queen, the first human-turned-vampire to hold such a position in centuries. It was controversial, unprecedented, and occasionally infuriating to deal with, but undeniable. Kaelin, who'd initially viewed me with suspicion, now treated me with respect earned through blood and bravery. Leora became a true friend, teaching me to navigate vampire politics with the same fierce protectiveness she'd shown guarding me. Myrian mentored me through new vampirism, patient with my questions and delighted by my human perspective. Even Faldor threw me an elaborate coronation celebration that was somehow both deeply solemn and wildly theatrical. But the human world demanded resolution too. I couldn't simply vanish from the lives of people who loved me. Natalie was the hardest. We met at our favorite coffee shop 2 weeks after my turning, early evening when the winter sun had just set. I ordered coffee I couldn't drink anymore, mourning that small loss while the barista prepared it. "You look different," Natalie said immediately, studying me with worried eyes. "Good different, but different. Are you okay? You disappeared for days, Thelma." I was terrified. "I'm moving," I said carefully, the lie of omission bitter on my tongue. "Not far, but my life is changing. I'm with Darian. Permanently. I know it's fast. I know it seems crazy, but Nat," I reached across the table, taking her warm hand in my now cold one. "I've never been more sure of anything." She noticed the temperature difference, I could tell, but didn't comment. Instead, she studied me. The pallor that makeup couldn't quite hide. The new grace in how I moved. The way I'd stopped fidgeting with nervous energy. "Are you happy?" she finally asked. "Really, truly happy?" "Terrifyingly happy," I admitted, and it was the truest thing I'd said. The kind of happy that feels too big to be real, like I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream. Natalie's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand. "Then I'm happy for you. But you better not become a stranger, Thelma Griffin. And this Darian better treat you like a queen, or I swear to God, I'll hunt him down myself." If only she knew how literally true that title was. Gilmore and Hawkins posed a more dangerous problem. Through Myrian's diplomatic skills and Darian's considerable resources, we arranged a meeting in neutral territory, a warehouse by the docks, appropriately dramatic. Hawkins came armed with silver and suspicion, expecting monsters. Instead, he found Darian's honor and me, transformed, but still carrying human compassion like a torch in the darkness. "Your daughter," I said quietly, knowing his story from Myrian's research. She was killed by vampires, who saw humans as prey. I'm so sorry. That should never have happened. I stepped forward, ignoring Darian's protective instinct to hold me back. But Darian and his court aren't those vampires. They're trying to create something different, a world where both kinds can exist without predation, where humans aren't cattle and vampires aren't monsters, where we're just people, different kinds of people. Hawkins stared at me for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. "You were human," he said finally. "2 weeks ago, yes. And now? Now I'm something else. But I haven't forgotten what it was like to be fragile, to be mortal, to measure life in years instead of centuries. I never will." It wasn't a simple resolution. Hawkins didn't suddenly embrace vampires or abandon his grief, but he agreed to a truce, to watch and wait. If Darian's court truly protected humans rather than hunted them, he'd stand down. It was fragile, tentative peace, but it was more than we'd hoped for. Graham turned out to be a minor vampire in Saris's network, a spy embedded in the human corporate world, feeding information about potential threats. With Saris's exile, Graham disappeared, likely fleeing to avoid Darian's justice. I couldn't bring myself to care. He'd chosen his side, and he'd lost. I maintained my human connections as carefully as Myran maintained his ancient texts. Coffee dates with Natalie, though I could only pretend to drink. Video calls with my mother in Florida, carefully scheduled for evening hours with excuses about my new night shift job. Emails with former colleagues, keeping those relationships alive even as I became something they'd never believe existed. The year unfolded in moments of adjustment and growth. February found me struggling with vampire politics, making rookie mistakes that made Kaylin wince, and learning that 800-year-old grudges required patient diplomacy. Darian taught me with surprising gentleness, his centuries of wisdom offered without condescension. By April, I'd found my voice in the council. I advocated for changes in how the court treated human blood donors, insisting on dignity, genuine consent, relationships of respect rather than predation. Some vampires resisted, clinging to old ways, but others, especially younger vampires, who'd never known anything but Darian's honorable rule, supported me. Change was slow, but it was happening. June brought travel to Europe, where I met ancient vampires who remembered when humans were openly enslaved. Their disgust at my presence was palpable. A human-turned-vampire queen, treated as an equal, given authority over creatures 10 times her age. But Darian stood firm beside me. "This is my queen," he declared to a particularly hostile conclave in Prague. "You will show respect or find yourselves unwelcome in my territories." The moment crystallized everything we were building: chosen partnership, mutual respect, love that bridged impossible divides. September arrived with Natalie's wedding. I stood as her maid of honor in the September twilight, the latest I could manage without raising questions, grateful that vampirism hadn't cost me this moment. Darian attended too, charming Natalie's family with old-world courtesy that made them sigh and wonder where I'd found such a perfect gentleman. No one suspected what he truly was and what we both were. November brought Thanksgiving to Darian's court. My insistence, my tradition. Teaching ancient vampires about gratitude and family created the strangest, most wonderful evening. Myran found the concept philosophically fascinating. Leora grudgingly admitted the food smelled appealing, even though none of us could eat it anymore. Even Kaylin smiled. Barely, but I counted it as victory. And then came December. Full circle to Christmas, exactly 1 year since the mistletoe kiss that had changed everything. Christmas morning found Darian and me on the rooftop of his brownstone, watching snow fall over Boston as the city woke to the holiday. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly, the question he'd been holding back for months. "What you've lost?" I considered honestly. I missed coffee. God, I missed coffee. I missed sunlight with an ache that would never fully heal. I missed the simplicity of my old life when my biggest problem was office politics and a cheating ex-fiancé. But I'd gained forever. Purpose, a love so deep it had literally transformed what I was. I'd become someone brave, someone who mattered, someone fighting to reshape centuries of darkness into something better. I miss sunlight, I admitted. I miss real food and coffee, and not having to carefully schedule my entire life around sunrise. "That's not an answer," he said, ancient worry in his voice. "I miss those things," I continued, turning to face him. "But I don't regret this. Not for 1 second. You've given me forever, Darian, and I choose to spend it with you, building the world we both want to see, where love wins, even when it's complicated and impossible and crosses every boundary that should exist." He pulled me close, and we stood together in the falling snow. A year ago, I'd been a heartbroken human avoiding love. Now, I was the vampire queen, partnered with an ancient king, working to reshape vampire society one careful step at a time. It was impossible, terrifying, perfect. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For that kiss, for your courage, for choosing this, choosing me, even when every logical reason said you shouldn't." I laughed, the sound carrying across the snowy rooftop. "You know what's funny? If Graham hadn't been such a creep, if you hadn't intervened at that party, none of this would have happened. I'd still be hiding from life, too scared to risk feeling anything." "Remind me to not thank Graham," Darian said dryly. "Oh, definitely not. But maybe thank the mistletoe." As if on cue, I noticed a sprig hanging from the rooftop pergola. Faldor's doing, no doubt, the romantic old vampire. I pointed it out to Darian. "I believe there's a tradition," he said, his ancient eyes warm with love and humor. "I believe you're right," I agreed. We kissed, vampire king and vampire queen, transformed and transforming, choosing each other and the impossible future we were building together. The kiss was nothing like that first one a year ago. That had been electric discovery, the spark that started boom in everything. This was deeper. Recognition, partnership, forever crystallized in a moment. When we parted, the sun threatened the horizon. We'd need to retreat inside soon, but not quite yet. "Merry Christmas," Darian said. "Merry Christmas," I replied. "And thank you." "For what?" "For being worth the risk, for teaching me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing you can do. For showing me that the right love doesn't require safety. It requires courage." Below us, Boston woke to Christmas morning. Natalie opening presents with her husband. My mother calling her children to spread holiday cheer. Hawkins perhaps visiting his daughter's grave, making peace with losses that would never fully heal. The human world turned, mostly oblivious to the supernatural one woven through it. And in that hidden world, two impossible people had created something unprecedented. A love that bridged mortal and immortal, human and vampire, fragile and eternal. Some kisses are just kisses, pleasant, forgettable, gone by morning. But some kisses under mistletoe at Christmas parties with mysterious strangers, those kisses change everything. They change your night, your life, your very soul. They change eternity, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Christmas morning arrived with snow falling soft and thick over Boston, turning the city into something from a winter fairy tale. Darian and I stood on the rooftop of his brownstone, watching the world wake below us. Lights flickering on in apartment windows, the distant sound of children's excited voices, families gathering for the ritual of presence and connection and love that continued whether vampires existed or not. "Do you regret it?" Darian asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the whisper of falling snow. "The choice you made, what you've lost?" I didn't answer immediately. The question deserved honesty, not platitudes. I turned it over in my mind, examining the truth from every angle. I missed coffee desperately, that morning ritual of warmth and bittersweet comfort, the way it used to center me before facing the day. I missed sunlight with an ache that lived in my bones, the feel of it on my skin, the way it painted the world in gold. I missed the simplicity of my old life, when my biggest problems were office politics and a cheating ex-fiancé. I missed the possibility of children, of growing old beside someone, of measuring time in the comfortable rhythm of human seasons. I'd lost my mortality, my human future, the woman I'd been. Those losses were real and permanent, and pretending otherwise would dishonor what I'd given up. "I miss sunlight," I admitted, still watching the city below. "God, Darian. I miss the sun. I miss my morning coffee ritual. I miss not having to carefully schedule every moment of my life around sunrise. I miss being able to eat Natalie's terrible homemade cookies at Christmas and actually taste them." "That's not an answer," he said softly, and I heard the ancient worry beneath his careful tone, the fear that he'd stolen something precious from me, that I'd wake one day centuries from now and hate him for it. I turned to face him, taking his cold hands in mine. "I miss those things," I said firmly. "But I don't regret this, not for 1 second. You've given me forever, Darian, and I choose to spend it with you, building the world we both want to see. A world where vampires and humans can coexist, where immortality doesn't require cruelty, where love wins, even when it's complicated and impossible, and crosses every boundary that should exist." I stepped closer, looking up into those ancient golden eyes that had seen centuries rise and fall. "I've gained so much more than I've lost. Purpose, power, a love so deep it literally changed what I am at the cellular level. I've become someone brave, someone who matters, someone who's reshaping vampire society one careful step at a time. My human self never imagined she could be this person. She was too scared, too hurt, too walled off to even dream of it." Darian pulled me close, and we stood together in the falling snow, two impossible creatures holding each other as the world turned. A year ago, I'd been a heartbroken human avoiding romance, building walls around my heart, convinced that safety was better than risk. Now I was the vampire queen of North America, partnered with an ancient king, working to reshape centuries of predatory culture into something better. It was impossible, terrifying, perfect. "Thank you," Darian whispered into my hair. "For what?" "For that kiss. For your courage. For choosing this. Choosing me. Even when every logical reason said you shouldn't. For teaching an 800-year-old vampire that he could still be surprised. Still feel human. Still believe in impossible things." I laughed, the sound carrying across the snowy rooftop and into the silent pre-dawn city. "You know what's funny? If Graham hadn't been such a creep at that party, if you hadn't intervened, none of this would have happened. I'd still be hiding from life, protecting my heart, too scared to risk feeling anything real. Remind me to never thank Graham, Darian said dryly. Oh, definitely not. But maybe we should thank the mistletoe. As if Faldor had been listening, and knowing him, he probably had been. I noticed a fresh sprig of mistletoe hanging from the rooftop pergola, tied with a red velvet ribbon that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. I pointed it out to Darian, shaking my head at the old vampire's romantic theatricality. I believe there's a tradition, Darian said, his ancient eyes suddenly warm with love and humor, and something that looked like joy. I believe you're right, I agreed. We kissed beneath the mistletoe as snow fell around us, Vampire King and Vampire Queen, transformed and transforming, choosing each other and the impossible future we were building together. The kiss was nothing like that first one a year ago at the Christmas party. That had been electric discovery, the spark of recognition, the beginning of everything. This kiss was deeper, recognition that had evolved into knowing, partnership forged in blood and choice, forever crystallized in a single, perfect moment. When we parted, the horizon was beginning to lighten, the sun threatening to break through the winter clouds. We'd need to retreat inside soon, back to our protected sanctuary underground. But not quite yet. Not until we'd watched one more moment of this beautiful, dangerous dawn. Merry Christmas, my love, Darian said softly. Merry Christmas, I replied. And thank you. For what? For being worth the risk, for making vulnerability feel like strength instead of weakness, for teaching me that the right love doesn't require you to be safe. It requires you to be brave enough to be vulnerable, to choose connection over protection, to risk everything for something real. Below us, Boston continued waking to Christmas morning. Natalie was probably opening presents with her husband right now, laughing over terrible gifts and making plans for the day. My mother would be calling her children soon, spreading holiday cheer across the miles. Hawkins might be visiting his daughter's grave, making peace with a loss that would never fully heal, but could perhaps, finally, coexist with hope. The human world turned in its familiar patterns, mostly oblivious to the supernatural one, woven seamlessly through it. And in that hidden supernatural world, two impossible people had created something unprecedented, a love that bridged mortal and immortal, human and vampire, fragile and eternal. A love that proved transformation was possible, that centuries of darkness could be lightened by one brave choice, that even monsters could be redeemed by finding the right person to love. Some kisses are just kisses, pleasant, forgettable, gone by morning like dreams you can't quite remember. But some kisses under mistletoe at Christmas parties with mysterious strangers who turn out to be vampire kings, those kisses change everything. They change your night, your life, your very soul. They change eternity itself. And as the sun broke over the Boston skyline, forcing us finally inside to safety, I knew with absolute certainty that I would make the same choice again. In every lifetime, some love is worth dying for, some love is worth living forever for. Ours was both. Thanks for staying with me till the end. I really appreciate you. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. And let me know what you learned from this story and where you're watching from in the comments.